Hello everyone, it is me Sasha Kawaii Cat, and in today's video I'll be showing you my full IbisPaint X coloring process. For this video, I decided to use a commission I finished recently for Melina on my Ko-fi account. Thank you again for commissioning me. For this drawing, it is basically a Miraculous Ladybug and Shiro crossover with the characters Mermista and Rena. I really had fun doing this drawing. I thought it turned out pretty well, so I decided it would be perfect for this tutorial. Before we begin, if you would like to follow along, I have some free line art available on my Ko-fi account. The links to those are in the description of this video. Feel free to pause and download the ones you like, and you can import that into IbisPaint X, and we can begin our full coloring process. These are all fan art, so the color palettes for these characters should be easy to find online. Okay, I assume you all are back by now, so let's get into this video. So just to get this out of the way for you all, so the first step is to open up IbisPaint X, and to import a drawing, all you need to do is click on the cross button on the top of the app. You'll see the option to import a picture, and that's pretty much it. If that drawing needs to be extracted, it shouldn't, but if it does, the option to do that pops up immediately. Okay, so we've gotten our sketching and our line art out of the way, and we're going into the coloring process. The first thing that we should get started with is just naming our layers. So just to get this out of the way, we'll take our line art layer and we'll name that line art, and just below that I want you guys to place a layer just below your line art layer, and I want you to name that your base layer. This is the layer where our base colors are going to be placed. I should say base color, it's one color. So we've gotten that out of the way, we've placed our base color, and the next step is we're going to click on the selection layer, and this is the layer that we're going to use to select the outer layer of our drawing. So we're going to use the magic wand to do that, and we're just going to select the outer layer of our drawing. You should see me doing that on my drawing right now. So there's a tool at the top of your screen that controls stuff like your selection area. On that layer, well, on that tool, you're gonna select Invert Selection area, right? And back in your drawing, you're going to click on the base layer that you've created, and that's where you're going to drop your color. So to make it easier, you can hide the line art area, and usually for the base color I use their skin tone. So for this drawing I used brown. So you're just gonna use the bucket tool, and you're going to fill in that area. Now you don't have to do this, but sometimes I do. Just below my base layer, I like to use the bucket tool to place a sort of gray color as the backdrop. Sometimes it's easier to add the colors that way. I don't know why. I think I've seen people do that, and I started doing it as well. I don't think that's how they do it. I don't think they actually put a color back there. I think they're lowering the opacity or something on that layer. I'm not quite sure, but yeah, I usually put a gray color there, and I use the transform tool to sort of make that color larger so it fills up the entire canvas. And then I get into the coloring process. So to color your drawing, now that you've filled in that base color, add a layer above that base color, and you're going to clip it to it. You're going to clip that layer to your base layer, and you can rename this layer your flat colors, because this is where you're going to add your flat colors. And once that's done, you can very easily go through and use your bucket tool, or however you like to color. I usually use the bucket tool. It's much quicker that way, and you can fill in your flat colors. So basically the steps that we did before, the creating the base layer, selecting the outer layer and stuff like that, it's just to make the coloring process a lot easier so that you don't go outside the lines. For me, it makes it a lot easier. It works for me. I have a better time coloring this way as opposed to filling it in a way where you have to, like, you end up going outside the lines and stuff like that. I find it's very tedious coloring on certain programs because of the way it's set up. Like, it's very easy to like use the bucket tool to just fill in your colors on IbisPaint X, which is why I prefer to use it to do most of my coloring. I sort of figured out how to do similar coloring, like following the same coloring process on like Procreate and stuff, but I always come back to IbisPaint X to like get my coloring done because I genuinely enjoy coloring in this app. To fill in the drawing, all you're using is the eyedropper and the bucket tool, basically. So you're using the eyedropper to select your colors based on your references. So I have my references pulled up. That's on a separate layer. I usually put this above my line art layer. And I have the references in a folder. Sometimes, if it's like numerous drawings, you don't actually have to put it in a folder. But you're using your eyedropper to select your color, and you're using the bucket tool to basically fill that in on your flat color layer. And that's all it is to like coloring in your flat colors. That's the first steps. It's pretty easy, pretty straightforward. For this drawing, I unfortunately spent a lot of time like trying to color in Rena's hair. I hope I'm saying her name right. I haven't watched Miraculous Ladybug in like a long time. I think I watched 2 seasons. It might have been 1, honestly, so I don't even know if I'm saying her name right. Rena. I hope that's correct. So for coloring in Rena's hair, I took a long time on that. So there's actually I actually took a bit longer to color this in because I had some extra steps to do with the flat colors, but overall it's a pretty straightforward process. So once the base colors are out of the way, we are going to add the blush. So for adding the blush, you're going to add a layer just above your base color layer, and that should be right in between the your base color and your flat color. So right above your base color, that's where you're going to add the blush, and that is just using your airbrush tool and selecting like a red color, a variant of red, I guess, any sort of red color, and just using your airbrush tool to fill in certain areas on your drawing. So key areas are like her cheeks, her nose. I usually fill in like her elbows, her knuckles, some areas on her skin that are visible. Not a lot of areas are visible on Mermista's skin, so I only did her face. But yeah, so certain areas on the character's body, you're gonna use your airbrush tool to just lightly fill that in, or lightly cover that area. We're not really filling anything in. Once that's done, you're going to lower the opacity on that layer. I think I lowered this to probably like 40 or something. You can make it lower like 30, 40 along that lines, but just wherever looks right to you, you lower the opacity, and that's the layer where you add the blush. You can rename that if you want. You can call that your blush layer. You don't have to, but I don't think I did, but you can. You know, just to keep things sort of organized, I guess. Once that is out of the way, we're then going to move on to our shading, our shadows, or whatever. So for this step, usually what I do, this is my coloring process. Usually what I do is I hide the base color. And because everything should be clipped to the base color, I hope I mentioned that before. When you're doing your flat colors, you're supposed to clip that to your base color, and the blush is supposed to be clipped to the base color as well. So you're basically clipping everything. below. And when you get to stuff like doing the shadows, what I do is I hide the base layer, and because everything is clipped to that, the flat color, the blush, is also hidden. So you get that out of the way and you should have like a blank line art. And what I do is I place a layer usually below the line art, but I don't clip it to anything for certain reasons. Like if you clip it, then it's nothing's gonna show up because your base layer is hidden. So you don't clip it, you just create a layer above your flat color layer. Or at this point I think it will be the blush layer. Oh, where's the blush? No, it's above the it is above the flat color layer. So you create a layer above that, and that is going to be where your shadows are. Yeah, shadows are. So for this process, I like to hide the coloring layer just so I can more accurately see what I'm doing. It's always worked for me, so I've just continued to color like this through the years. And usually I like to work with a bright pink color, or a bright purple color, really. Any color will do, I think. Like any bright color will do, I guess. Because I'm going to change it later slightly anyway. I'm going to adjust it, so. But I like to use a very bright color. Oh my god, I hope I'm explaining this correctly. So for that layer, you can make that layer a multiply layer. So where it says normal on where your layers is, just click on that and click on multiply. You can also do this with your blush layer. You don't have to, depending on how dark or light you make your color. It doesn't matter too much, but if you want, you can make your blush layer a multiply layer as well, but it's not really necessary. But most of the time I do, so you can. Okay, so back to the shading. You make that layer a multiply layer, and you can just go in and start doing your shadows. For the shading, I think I usually start at the top and just work my way down. I'm not very good at coloring shadows. I've always had like a difficult time doing the shading and stuff like that. But I always just try my best and try to make it work. And usually it turns out okay. So once I have my shading done, usually I go in and I click on filter. And there's an option to change the drawing color. You'll see it. And I sort of play around with how the color looks. I think most of the time I settle on like a dark shade of red, or maybe a purplish color. And then I lower the opacity on that, and that is the shading. Once the shading is out of the way, the next step is to add the highlights or the light or whatever. And for that, you create a layer above your shading layer, and you can either make that layer an overlay layer or an add layer. That's what I usually do. Usually I go with overlay. I think for this drawing I used overlay, so you can use overlay. And you add in your highlights or light or whatever. Usually for this, I try to go in one direction, but shading is complicated for me. I'm not very good at it, but I try my best. So for this drawing, you can see that I'm just adding it to how would I explain this? The front of her, but also I add some on the back, I guess. It's hard to explain, but I guess some things that I can explain that I do is that I like to add a lot of little hearts in their hair, so you can see me doing that. For some of this stuff, I feel like hopefully y'all can just follow the what you're seeing on screen, because some of it it's hard for me to actually explain what I'm doing, but you can see visually, you know, what I'm doing, the direction that I'm adding the highlights, what I'm adding to her hair. And you can always use the image as a reference and you know, follow along in your own drawing process. You can see that I add like highlights on their lips and little highlights on their cheeks, for instance, and the line on their nose, and like inside their eyes. What I do is I add like some highlights there as well, because usually I try to keep the eyes very simple, especially in drawings that are like full body drawings, because the eyes aren't really closed up, so I don't think it really matters how detailed they are. Once that's out of the way, once you're finished with your highlights, the next step would be to color in some sections of your line art. So to do this is also a very straightforward process. All you're doing is creating a layer above your line art, and you're clipping it to that layer. And once that's done, you can just use a brush and color in certain areas of your drawing. Usually what I like to do is color the inside of the character's skin. So like there's a line underneath her neck, right? A dark line. I usually color that in with a sort of like a skin tone that would match her, like a color that would match her skin tone, I should say. You can see the color that I'm sort of using. I think for like for darker skin tones I used like a reddish brown color, and then for like lighter skin tones I might go with like a sort of bright pinkish, like peach-ish color, I guess. Yeah, so I'll color in like the inside of like you know, the skin tone areas, so like her nose, her eyelids, her lips, and stuff like that. Where her skin tone is, I'll color in. But yeah, so that's just adding a bit of color to the drawing, so it's not all just black. Usually also what I like to do with the line art area is I like to change it from just being black to like a variant of that, I guess. Like I'll go in and I'll move it a little bit towards like red, but still black, but like off black, I guess, if that makes sense. It's not like black if that makes sense. I hope you guys get what I'm saying, but you can do that as well. I think I did that with this drawing. I don't always do this, but sometimes I do. Most times I do. And that's just doing the same thing I did with like changing the color on the shading area. It's just clicking on the line art layer, selecting filter, and just clicking on change drawing color. And that's pretty much it. Another thing that I believe I went in and did was add some light to their hair, I guess. So on another layer, you create an add layer. So you'll click a layer and you'll change that from normal to add, or sometimes overlay. I think for this one I used add. You're going to use your airbrush to just airbrush the outer edges of their hair, and I think that's pretty much it. Then I did the background, but the background, I usually take a long time figuring out what to do with the background. I have certain brushes that I use, certain colors, but to explain that briefly, for the background, you're creating a layer beneath everything else. So this would be, I think, beneath your base color probably. And that's pretty much it. The drawing is finished. That is my full coloring process. I hope I explained it okay. And if I didn't, I hope that you could follow along in like what I was doing in the video. And yeah, that's pretty much it for my coloring process. For some of these brushes, I think I'll make a tutorial on how to do how to make custom brushes at some point, and how I do backgrounds. But for now, if you guys want to download some of my custom brushes, I'll have some available for free on my Ko-fi account in the description. Also, if you follow me on any of my social media accounts, if you follow me on Instagram, Facebook, or Twitter, or any of that, all of which are in the description of this video, please send me your drawings if you followed along with this coloring tutorial, and you did some coloring or anything like that. I would love to see what you did. You can send those to me there. Thank you so much for watching this video. If you like my content and you'd like to show your support, you can always donate to my Ko-fi account. The link to that is in the description below. Don't forget to like, share, comment, and subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye!